The most shocking thing about Is God Is watching revenge slowly transform one sister while the other fights to hold on to her humanity.
In the trailer for the film, we see the mother of these twins tell them to make your daddy dead.
Yeah, you gotta admit that this was a good hook to make viewers want to see the film.
So, like many of you, we did go to see this film in the theater so we could tell you all about it.
Why does she have to talk like that, though?
She said, make your daddy dead.
It sounds like some David Oyelowo stuff.
I mean, it really, though, that's one of the things that really hooked me to like, okay, I got to see this movie. Speaking of which, in the little hamlet where we lived, the film wasn't initially playing during the opening weekend, and I was really annoyed by that. But somehow it popped up later. I don't know what was up with that. Did it expand theaters later? I don't know. But the film was written, produced, and directed by Alicia Harris in her feature directorial debut. And it's based on Harris's 2018 play. And so the film focuses on twin sisters who set out on a quest for revenge against their father for disfiguring them as children. And so this movie, aside from the twins, had really an all-star cast, right? It introduced these two girls or young ladies. We probably haven't seen them in anything or many things, but the other folks who are in here are well-known names. But we have Kara Young as Racine, who's the outspoken and aggressive twin sister who suffered burns to her left arm. And then we have Mallory Johnson playing Anaya, the quiet and compassionate twin sister who was burned on her face. So that's really how you'll tell the twins apart. And also, they are very different in size. One is a lot taller and bigger than the other sister when you look at them side by side as well. And then we have Vivica A. Fox playing Ruby. And the twin sisters, she's the mother of these twins, and they refer to her as God, and we'll explain why later. And then we have Sterling K. Brown as the twin sisters' father. Janelle Monáe is playing Angie, Sterling K. Brown's character, their father's new wife. And then Michael T. Williams as Chuck Hall, who is the man who was the defense attorney for this crime that is committed against the mother and the daughters, who ultimately gets him off, the father off for the crime. Then we have Erica Alexander as Divine, who's this church leader who fell in love along the way with the father and had a child with him. Xavier Mills as Scotch, who is the twin brother so there are really two sets of twins in here, because later their father has another set of twin boys. And so those twins are played by Xavier Mills and Justin Ross, and they are like, one is outgoing and one is more reserved, kind of, you know, to give you this stark contrast. And then we get Josiah Cross as Ezekiel, who is Divine's son that he has along the way before he has this final family. So is this a good movie? It's streaming now, and we purposely waited until it was streaming so that hopefully more of you have seen this film. That's the question we'll be answering, as well as kind of our first watch review and discussion. So I think this film deserves even more discussion than just this one video. But ultimately, what is God Is all about, and was it good for the first watch?
I'm Heit.
And I'm Cheri.
And you've discovered Axiom Amnesia.
We want to thank all of the supporters who helped to make this video possible. If you want your name to appear alongside these contributors, make a one-time donation via Cash App, or you can head on over to patreon.com/axiomamnesia to enjoy all of the benefits of becoming a monthly subscriber. So the film opens with these twin little girls on a bench. It's clearly like a flashback. And so they're sitting on a bench, maybe at school or someplace like that. And then we hear a kid that is making fun of one of the girls, calling her ugly. And the other sister, who is not being called ugly, picks up this plastic bat off the ground, and we see her go off screen. And then we hear the kid screaming, and we obviously understand that she is done beat the brakes off this kid. And I was like, okay, I love the way that this started. And so then after this flashback, we get a montage of their current life as these young adults. And they are cleaners, they are housekeepers, and so they clean up in buildings or whatever after that. And then we kind of get an idea of the personalities of these two sisters. So Racine is the tough one who is described as still having some pretty to her, right, by her sister Anaya. And Racine, she only got burned on one of her arms, so her face is not disfigured. But then we have Anaya, who has burns on her face that have just disfigured her. And when you have your face disfigured, that obviously affects the way, that's the first thing people see when they see you. They want to know what happened to you. And that obviously affects the way that you navigate the world. And so we see twins, and we think of twins as being kind of almost like, two people who are going to look alike, but then we have one, who is taller and bigger, and one who's smaller. We have one who is disfigured in the face, and the other one who still has some pretty to her. And we see them still, though, living life very much in lockstep. They do everything together. They can even hear each other's thoughts, and they have this telepathic way of communicating. And, so that is like the thing that kind of tugged at my heart initially, was just like how sad it must be, and how even more, because if she was in a twin, she doesn't get to really see how it, what her life would be or how she would be received if she didn't have these burns on her face. But unfortunately, she gets to see that up close and personal through her twin Racine. Anaya makes the statement that I don't get to be mean, I have to be nice. So she's got to be nice because she's not pretty. And like, that is just saying so much, because even if she wasn't disfigured in the face, if you have someone who is very pretty and someone who is even average, they don't even have to be ugly, but certainly if they were quote unquote ugly by societal standards, which is essentially what Anaya is facing, then they have to be nicer in order to have people treat them well. Whereas somebody who is beautiful or pretty, or even just in stark contrast, right, doesn't have to be as nice, because people want to be nice to beautiful people, or people want to be nice to people whom they find attractive. And, I don't know why this always reminds me of when you talk about how it was in when you were in the Marines and you guys were deployed, and how the women who were deployed suddenly, you might be a 5 at home, but you're like a
just
10.
A common concept where people say that, and it's not even just deployed. It's just always, especially in the Marine Corps, where it's not as many women there, right? So it's just like, yeah, that's a Marine Corps 10, or a Iraq 10 or something.
But yeah, so that whole concept, right? So then, let me just hop in here and let you guys know that, as many of you all know, changes on this platform have pushed us toward a more viewer-funded model. So if you'd like to help keep this channel and our other channels going, there are a few easy ways you can support us. You can become a member and unlock over 100 exclusive videos, plus additional member perks. You can become an executive producer or co-executive producer on an upcoming video through our Deep Dive on Demand, starting at just $10, which gets your name on screen and a shout out during the video. Or you can pick some merch to represent the community. Also, don't forget to join our mailing list so you never miss a video across any of our channels. And if you're looking for something to watch after this video, check out our bedtime binge playlist that's linked below. It's full of videos you may have missed. You'll find links to all of these options in the description. And again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. And thanks for helping keep these deep dives coming. And early in the film, they get this letter saying that they have a mother, because they didn't grow up with this mother. So they get a letter, we have a mother, and they had been told that she died in the fire that disfigured them. And so they ask, well, so immediately, if you find out you've had a mother this whole time, and well, why weren't you with your mother, and why didn't she come see them in the hospital, and all of this stuff. So this is when we do see them, though, talking telepathically, and their scars, even though it's many years since this fire that they were in when they were little girls, they still are icing the scars from their burns. So it's not only do they have the emotional effects of having been in this fire, physically the burns and scars still hurt today, and they're icing them to make them feel better. And so then they go and set off on this road trip to see their mother, who lives, quote unquote, down south.
Of course, the dum dum dum. Where is she? Down south.
Down south. I got family
so
down
foreign.
south. So, but then they refer to their mother as God, because she made them. That's their logic. She's God because she made them. And so there's a welcome sign on the in the front when they get to the house where God lives, where their mother lives. So upon first seeing their mother, she's in bed being cared for, by these women, and they're braiding her hair in these like really long, braids, and she is burned on all over her body and disfigured in the face.
But even before that, they get to the door and Anaya's name is spelled wrong on the door.
Anaya just doesn't ever get like any, she just doesn't get a break. It's just like crazy. So their mother is burned all over her face and body. So she has the scars that both of the girls have, right? Body scars and all over her face. And then, these three girls are braiding her hair simultaneously. And, we've been prepped that, that they're calling her God. She's God. And then it's like, okay. And then she has these attendants. And so even though she is, clearly very ill and laid up in the bed and bed bound, there is something that seems sort of majestic or definitely seems godly about her, that she has these attendants and in this moment. And so Racine comes in and she's like, well, how you been, mama? And the mama responds, dying. And then they all laugh, right? So she's saying like, hey, look, I'm dying right now. And Racine does the talking, and Anaya, she's shy and emotional, so she doesn't say much. And the mother is like, says that she wants them to think she wanted them to think that she was dead because she didn't want them to have a mother who looked like an alligator. And and that's kind of sad too, but I was like, is that really the reason? But then at the same time, if she's been like this for the whole time since she was initially burned all these years, she couldn't have taken care of them anyway. So, but she at least could have let them know that she existed, but okay. Because
I don't know if she was like that the whole time.
Yeah. So I don't,
that's a major thing what's wrong with the film is that the mother abandoned them too, and they go through this whole thing where the father burned them and then abandoned them, but the mother did the exact same thing, right? So, yeah. But
because the mother is a victim, then there's not really this question about her. They want to know why she didn't let them know that she was alive, but they don't hold her to anything on that. They're just like, okay, I'm happy to have a mother. She was a shared victim in this. She's sick. She's dying in this moment. And so, so they ask what happened. And then we get a flashback basically of the incident where the fire occurs. And so the mother's in the kitchen making food, and she has a restraining order against their father. And he basically broke in and he attacked her. And so then but this is all through the mother's eyes telling this story in this moment. And so she's like, I could fight or I could let him touch her because, he gets on top of her, and is wanting to, So, and then she was like, because he do got a tender side. Men like your daddy always got a tender side. And I was like, this is just an interesting characterization, because obviously going into it, you like, this is a monster who could set his wife and children on fire. Like, come on. And then she's talking about his tender side in the same incident where he has burned them all, right? So then he starts choking her out and he puts her in a tub, and then he brings the girls in the bathroom and tells them it's a game and says, let's wake mommy up, and basically drops a match on her after he pours accelerant on her. And then we hear the screams of the children, and we see him light up a cigarette, her and the children, everybody screaming because they're all on fire because the girls were close to the tub as well when this happens. And he goes out and he just light a cigarette and starts smoking, looking out the front, on the front porch or whatever, while everybody is screaming. And so she tells the girls that their scars are from trying to save her, when she's in the tub. They see her on fire, they're going to try to save her, they, are burned in the process. Then the mother tells Racine that, you were always my big girl, and you came out first screaming bloody murder. And then, but Anaya was always emotional. And then, so I got to thinking about the scars and where they were. Okay. So the one who was burned on her face, to me, I feel like maybe that means she was closer, or she was, but I she doesn't have burns like all over her hands and arms. But then you have the one who was burned on her arm. Like, so Racine might have been reaching out, right, to try to save her, or maybe Racine is burned when she's trying to save Anaya. Like, it's unclear, but I always feel like Anaya was the more even though she's more emotional, like the one who was less angry, at least at that point, But then again, we really don't know anything beyond the fact that the mother says that Anaya is the one. I mean, that Racine is the one who's more outspoken, and Anaya is more emotional. We don't know much more about them before the burns and the fire and who they became as a result of these scars. So the mother says, look, there's something I need you to do. And that's when we get the line we've been waiting for from the trailer. Make your daddy dead, and she tells them to destroy everything around him and to kill his spirit, then the body, like he did me. Now, how was he killing her spirit first? Obviously, he was, there was DV involved. He was hitting on her and stuff like that. He's killing her spirit before he finally, takes this heinous act, does this heinous act and sets her on fire along with the girls. So the twins look at each other and they start making excuses in the awkward moment. They're like, the idea seems a little crazy. You sure you don't want to forgive and forget? And then she's like, pull this blanket up off of me. And then when they pull the blanket back and they see how her body is just all disfigured and burned, they are just shocked. We as the audience don't get to see what it looks like. Kind of thank goodness, because my gosh. But the mother says she's not going to have any peace until she knows that he's gone. And she's basically like, can y'all do that for your mother? Just this one last thing before I die. So the girls are convinced to go and make their daddy dead, right? So the twins, they argue about it though on the way. Anaya says that Racine is just being used, and she argues that and Racine is arguing like, look, he's responsible for everything bad that has happened to us, for them being in foster care, for them being burned, for them going through all of this stuff. And imagine what our lives would look like if he hadn't done this. And I think that anytime something tragic happens to you, there's always what if it didn't happen? What could it be? And that's part of the loss that is mourned anytime a tragedy occurs. If somebody dies tragically because somebody, like, let's say somebody killed them, then, you're left to think, well, what would my life be if I still could have had this person the whole time? What would my life be if I wasn't disfigured by these burns? How would people receive me? People wouldn't be calling me ugly. People wouldn't, and so I think that psychological effect of the trauma is also something that, regardless of if they even ever healed from the scars, was something that was going to be with them. If you've ever watched one of our deep dives and thought, you should cover this movie next, Deep Dive on Demand is for you. With a sole executive producer credit, you can choose any movie you want for just a $75 contribution. You'll be the sole executive producer on that video. You're going to receive on-screen credit, and you're going to get a shout out during the video. If you're looking for a lower cost option, our co-executive producer credits start at just $10. You just choose a film from our select list and you'll receive on-screen credit and a shout out along with other co-executive producers for that video. We also have a couple of limited time bundles available. You can get 3 co-executive producer credits for just $25, and that's a $30 value. Or our biggest bundle yet, 1 sole executive producer credit for the movie of your choice, plus 3 co-executive producer credits for just $75 total. That's a $105 value. You guys, that is, I think, our biggest bundle we've ever had. It's a great way to support the channel while you help us decide what movies to cover next. And you'll find links to all of these options in the description below. When her sister tells her this, when Racine tells Anaya, like, hey, imagine our life if this didn't happen, then we see Anaya imagining herself with a normal face kissing a man. And she's at that age where she wants to have love interests. And prior to this, we find out that, Anaya has basically been, she still has sex. Somebody's going to hit it and did, but like, it's not this loving relationships that she seems to have wanted. Certainly is not something face to face with him because she feels ugly, So Racine says that she just needs Anaya to keep her company and that she's just going to do everything to get revenge on the father, right? And this is how it's been since they were children. If we think back to that flashback, this is exactly what it was when they were growing up. She was the one who, when the kid making fun of her at school, she was the one who picked up that bat and went and beat the brakes off that other little kid. So Anaya is the one who is sensitive and gets hurt. And then we see Racine as the enforcer. Racine is going to go handle things, and this is no different. So Anaya gets convinced to go. they first go and look for this lady named Divine, because she's the lady that their father took up with after their mother. And so they pull up to this church, and, Divine, who's played by Erica Alexander, is an evangelist, and she's slaying people in the spirit in the church. And I mean, it's like this most over the top, crazy example of a church. It sort of reminded me of the foolishness in that movie. And wasn't that Sterling K. Brown in Honk for Jesus?
Yeah,
That,
I think so.
something like that. So I find it interesting. They're always kind of making fun of the I guess it would be modern black church right now in these films. So Ezekiel is Divine's son, and basically this is their half brother that they don't know, and he's introduced at this point, and he's grown. And so Divine says, I bet you will find it strange that I would take up with a man who was accused of these things, right? Because Divine was the one who, while he was going through the trial for burning up the mother and the daughters, she was the one who was his woman at that time that stood by his side. And she says that, she doesn't know where he went, but he promised me that he would be back for her, talking about her and their son. And obviously he never came back, and she's got this shrine or whatever, and she kept his stuff and all of that, where she's basically still waiting for him to return, and he's out living his life or whatever. So it's literally like an altar that she's built with his personal items, which in the moment, the way it's depicted seems comical, but it's also very sad if you think about it. So she says that if you find him, tell him Divine kept her promise, which, Divine and her son Ezekiel are just straight out weird. But Ezekiel is co-signing everything that his mama says in the moment or whatever. So Racine says that, he must have laid down the D right, because that's the only reason that you'll be sitting up here waiting on a man who left you while you were pregnant. But yet, you got the grown child and you still waiting. So in the process, Racine, she steals Divine's address book, which has the, information presumably about where the father's location currently is. So she steals it. And then when Racine realizes it, they're pulling off away from the church, and, Divine is trying to chase, but they get away or whatever. So then the twins discuss how they're going to kill the father, and they're debating, hey, a gun versus poison. And, then Anaya keeps, because she's not convinced. She's like, but look, we not killers, but it doesn't matter. Racine is still going to keep going. So they go to see Chuck Hall, who's played by Michael T. Williams. And he's the lawyer who got the father off in the trial, got him off. And they found his information in Divine's address book. So when they arrive at Chuck's office, he's being beaten by this woman who we later understand that is paid to beat him or whatever. And oddly, he has no tongue. So he narrates this and says, since the terrible day, he's basically been expecting somebody to come and kill him. And so he uses this woman who is beating him so that he can be ready for when they come. In other words, ready to be tortured and beaten so that he can hold up to this beating or whatever. So he holds up a sign asking the girls if they're there, they could kill him. And he tells them to, hey, look, just go home, get into school or something, just leave after he understands who they are. And Racine says, you going to tell me something, even if I got to beat it out of you. Well, he's been getting, it's just crazy. He's been getting beaten so he could be prepared to hold up to it. And, he's talking about, oh, well, the time has come, but he can't even take one hit from Racine. Like, isn't this crazy? Like, who would think to I need to pay somebody to beat me so that I could be ready for when these people come, when I'm sure the person who's going to come back and try to torture me comes, So basically we find out how he loses his tongue. After he gets off for the case, gets the daddy off, then they're celebrating the verdict. They're in the car, and the father cuts his tongue out for fear that he would talk and tell later on. So he also said he didn't want to see the girls this one last time because he might be tempted to finish the job. So clearly we find out, we felt like he was a monster, but he definitely is a whole monster. Not only does he not want to see his children that he done burned up and got off for burning up the wife and the children, but because he says he might be tempted to basically finish the job and kill them. But he cuts out his lawyer's tongue after the lawyer gets him off for the crime, So Chuck tells Racine that she's like her father in the eyes, but that she's foolish. So we kind of suspect by this point, though, that Racine has some of her father in her for sure, because she's the one that's going around regulating. She's fearless. She's the one who's willing to take on a big fight and all of that. But she's foolish, is what Chuck is saying. And Chuck's like, look, be careful with vengeance because you never know where the blood will land. So he's trying to tell him, like, look, check it out. But he does give them the father's whereabouts. And he also tells them that their father has 2 more and he has a set of twin boys. So the girls argue again because Anaya says that Racine is enjoying this too much. And Racine argues that they've been stepped on too much in life and that it's his fault and that she's not going to be sad for giving him what's coming to him. Again, she is committed to this vengeance, not just on the mother's behalf, but like, is Racine really doing this for the mother or is she doing it on her and Anaya's behalf? What do you think?
She's doing it for herself, I think, right?
Yeah. I mean, even though the mother asked it and I think it's convenient to hide behind that the mother made the request as to how they're, as to this whole thing.
Yeah, but what she said when she was speaking to Anaya was to say that he caused all of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really about the mother.
Yeah.
And even in her explanation.
So Anaya says that she wants to see what it feels like to tell somebody that they're ugly and step on them. So here, and this is one of the few moments where Anaya is on the bandwagon, like, yeah, I want to see what it feels like to tell somebody they ugly and step on them because this has been her life since she has been, enduring these burns. And then she says, it must feel good since everybody does it. Ooh, that really touched me because I'm like, as common of a feeling as it is to feel ostracized or to feel like people have been mean or wrong to you, it seems that so many of us embrace making other people feel bad so that we could feel good. And I was just like, I mean, they were dropping gems in this film, and which is one of the reasons why I felt like some of these things need to be discussed, and one overview video is just not going to cut it for this movie. So they had pulled over basically when this happens because they're having this discussion or whatever, and they had to pee or whatever, and so then a motorcycle dude with a helmet on shows up and he takes a hammer, he hits the engine of their car, they're running and hiding from him, and so we get this whole action scene really where he's chasing them through this abandoned warehouse, and then they're finally able to lock him into the warehouse or whatever. But why that ain't nobody but Ezekiel? And he was like, how y'all think y'all gonna go kill my daddy, the man who made me? And I'm like, bro, he abandoned you and you are over here basically willing to commit murder on his behalf after what he did to you, which is just so nuts. But the girls walk away and they discuss what they're going to do about their twin brothers. And Anaya argues that, look, they're innocent. And Racine says nobody is innocent. So from this end, I was thinking like, so even the beneficiaries, the people who haven't actually done anything, but if they're living the life that you feel like you should be living, from Racine's point of view, they're not innocent. Nobody is innocent in her mind, which you could argue later if that's factual or not. But they find some water and then they point out like, hey, this seems too good to be true. And it is kind of like an oasis in the desert, when they're walking, because now their car has been disabled. So they then it cuts to them getting off of the Greyhound, which reminds me, y'all, listen, bus service in America is just done. Don't even try it anymore. We recently decided to be adventuresome and to take a bus someplace. And oh my gosh, it was the worst experience I've ever had traveling ever. And this was in such stark contrast because I don't know, this was like maybe 12 years ago, something like that, where we decided we were going to take a bus. And it was back when Megabus was around. And Megabus was actually kind of cool. It wasn't stopping a gazillion places, kind of like the Greyhound and everything. You could pay to get the front seats. And it was not bad and a reasonably comfortable ride. And at the time, we were traveling between, I think, Dallas and Memphis. And there was it would only stop once in Little Rock, Arkansas. And it was an 8-hour bus trip, but it would like, you'd leave at like 11 or midnight. And then you'd be there by the morning. And I was like, how convenient. You could kind of sleep on the way. And, and it's great. All right. So, but this trip was just horrible. Don't recommend it to anybody. Have you guys taken the bus at all lately? Like at this point, just however you can get there, rent a car or whatnot. Just don't even bother. Because, it's tempting, because if you go, hey, it's not really far enough that you want to be taking a plane and getting to an airport. And plus, there's always the complexity. You're lucky if you live in a huge city with an airport. But if you don't, there's always that calculus of, well, do I want to drive to the airport in the bigger city so that I can fly to someplace else that's also maybe not a big city, so, but yeah. So they get off the Greyhound in this bus. And the twins pull up to their father's, basically his nice house, his estate. And so the twins' mother, Angie, is played by Janelle Monáe. And she is basically presenting as the perfect wife, but she says, not today. And so the twin boys have lived this life of comfort. They're adults. And they have this, they got an obsession with people peeing in this movie. Because, we see the girls peeing outside. Then we see Janelle Monáe peeing on the toilet at some, but, and I was just like, what is up with that? I mean, I guess we could analyze that. Another movie where I feel like it's supposed to be significant when somebody pees is Beloved, where I think Senta, I think is her name, Septa. Oprah Winfrey's character, she sees Paul D coming and she hadn't seen him in many years. And then as soon as she sees him, she's just like, oh, she got to go stand outside and pee. But that was back in the day where maybe they were using outhouses, but this is modern day. And, and we got to look at people peeing. I don't know what the deal was with that, but that's an analysis for another day. So go to the comments if you have an analysis you want to share with us, though. She calls the boys to get her bags, put them in the car or whatever. This is Angie. And then because she's planning to go to Vegas, she's going to gamble to get some money because she's leaving her husband and the boys. Right. So clearly their father has just continued his DV ways, and he's just a horrible man. So the girls, they sit in the road and they're blocking Angie's way. So Angie approaches them and is like, hey, is everything okay? And Racine's like, they are his first kids and stuff. And Angie is like, okay, are you here for child support? And then she takes off her necklace and she attempts to give it to them. And I'm just like, what? I just want to remind you guys that if you're not a member on Axiom.app, Patreon, or YouTube, you're missing out on over 100 exclusive member-only videos, plus other perks like early access to some videos, your name listed as a contributor in videos, and more. So join today for as little as $5 a month, and it's a great way to support the channel. The link is in the description. But anyway, and Angie is like, their daddy lied to her, and Racine basically takes Angie's keys, and Angie was like, what are you gonna, and she calls them like a pack of animals. So she turns on them really quickly. And the girls, say that they're on a mission from God. Of course, God being their mother, but, imagine how this, sounds to Angie's ears in a moment. And Angie's like, it's not my fault that your ghetto trash ass mama got burned. She should have left. And then she spits in Racine's face. And I was thinking to myself, why would she say that, about their mother and to them? And clearly when they have the upper hand, it's just nuts. But then Racine, Racine is going to go off. Racine beats Angie with a sock that has rocks in it. And like, she just beats her just to death. And so the girls approach the house where the twin brothers are. They introduce themselves and the boys invite them in. They don't introduce themselves as their sisters, though. And so they think the girls are strippers that the father has sent them for their birthday. And so the shorter one is named Riley, and he is trying to convince Scotch, who's the other one who's taller and bigger. So Riley is shorter. He's more pragmatic. He's the quieter one. And then the over the top one is Scotch, who is, muscle bound and bigger and all that. And so they let the girls in. And then Anaya makes Racine the promise that their daddy is going to be the only one that they kill. Because Anaya's like, look, we can't be killing our brothers. And, so Racine's like, look, we only going to kill the daddy, not the brothers. So then they decide to play along because they realize that the boys think that they're just strippers coming. And so the twins have invited their friends to see these strippers, and they're like 5 guys plus the brothers. Meanwhile, Racine notices that Anaya's boobs have gotten big, and Anaya confirms in this moment that she's pregnant by the dude that she's been letting hit it from the back, right? And so also, we find out here that they've been foster kids the entire time. So it wasn't like they went to a family member. They were in the system from the time that they got out of the hospital with these burns. And so the twins walk out in lingerie, and the girls start dancing for their brothers and for their brother's friends. And Scotch tells Anaya, look, you got to turn around, and tells Racine to dance facing them. So they're like, basically, Anaya, I want to see your body, but not your face. And then Racine is dancing facing them, but Anaya runs off, right? And Racine says, my sister ain't ugly. And then she continues to dance for her brothers. And I was just thinking, like, how, this is, I just feel like this is just such a, in a nutshell, way to describe the way that men like Scotch view some women as just objects. Listen, I like your body, but not your face. Turn around and don't face me, but still dance for me to please me, essentially sexually, right? And so, obviously Anaya's feelings are hurt by what happens, and Racine stands up for her. But meanwhile, in the kitchen, we see that Riley, that's the other brother who doesn't want to watch all this going on, and Anaya, they get to talking, and he asks her, like, what happened to your face? She doesn't answer. And she's like, your brother seems like he fits in and all of that. And Riley confesses that his brother was always the one out front. And so Riley and Anaya have a lot in common, because both of them are the more quiet and reserved ones of the twin relationships that they have. Then we get this part where, you ever get the feeling that he's happy, you're strange? This is what Anaya says to Riley. And then Anaya confesses what happened in the fire. So this is the piece where I feel like never up to this point, even though they're arguing, do we feel like Anaya and Racine are somehow that there's some animosity there. Only the fact that they disagree on what they should do. Not that she has a problem with her sister, but when she points to this idea that do you ever get the feeling that, like, she's happy that you're strange? So in a way, we understand that Racine benefits from being next to Anaya, who is disfigured, right? Because it automatically makes her look better and be received more positively by people than she otherwise would have been if she was alone. And this reminds me a lot of the kind of the ugly friends situation or syndrome that you'll hear women talk about, where, somebody who's really pretty will never want to be with another pretty girl as her friend. She likes to be with a girl who's average or maybe even ugly, because it gives her even more attention from the guys. So yeah. So it made me think of that. And we realized that there are some cracks in that relationship between Anaya and Racine. So meanwhile, Racine winds up cutting Scotch's throat, and his friends flee, leaving Riley to watch him die. And Riley cries and then starts laughing over the body after he realizes his brother is dead. It was just like the weirdest thing. But in the process of this discussion about, the quieter twin versus the louder twin, realizing that there's probably this animosity, maybe that was the reason. So Racine says that, if they don't do the other brother talking about Riley, that he's going to tell. And Anaya tries to get Racine not to kill Riley, and they argue over this or whatever. And so Anaya pushes Racine, and then Anaya and Racine start physically fighting. And Racine tells her to square up, and Anaya, she flees with Riley. So Anaya says, she feels lost and found, and like she wants to tell him everything. And even though she couldn't tell Racine all the stuff, even the stuff she can't tell Racine. And then Riley thanks her, and then he starts choking her. And I was just like, dang, Anaya is so vulnerable, and she just, anybody that's gonna give her a little bit of love and make her feel a little bit understood, she's just like, yes. She don't even know Riley like that, even though this is her brother. And this got her in the situation where she's she's literally getting choked out. And so Racine comes, she saves her life, and they start, fight. The folks start fighting on the lawn. Riley is choking, and and Anaya, Riley now is choking Racine, and Anaya saves Racine now by stabbing Riley in the back with these hedge clippers or whatever. And meanwhile, the father has returned home. We haven't seen the father the whole time. All this stuff is blamed on the father. They looking for the daddy. We haven't seen him the whole time. So Racine is passed out and Anaya drags her away. And then the father discovers his dead sons. He doesn't panic. He doesn't scream. He just looks and he's like, okay, all right, dead people. Okay. So Anaya is hiding under the dining room table with Racine still passed out. And the father makes him a whole sandwich, like, what the heck? And sits at the table to eat. And while with them underneath the table hiding. And he's like, seems like we got a lot to talk about. Why don't you come sit with me? So he knows doggone well that they're under the table. So Anaya now, because Racine is passed out, has to be the one to do the talking, the negotiation and whatever. So she climbs out from under the table. And the father says, well, you ain't a complete monster. That's something. And I was just like, that's cold-blooded, so he talking about her, how she physically looks. And how about we take turns asking each other questions is his idea to do. And so, why did you set her on fire is what Anaya asked. And he says, because she wouldn't let me hold her. He asks her, well, basically, who did you kill first? And and she's like, I didn't kill nobody. And then he's like, who was first? And your wife is what she says. So what did you use on Angie and the rest? And then she shows the rock in the sock or whatever, because that's the question he wants to know. Like, what did she use for the killing? So the father says that, basically how he acted was the perfect, in killing the mother or trying to kill her and the girls. It was the perfect response for a young man out of control. He's talking about himself.
It's an appropriate response.
It's an appropriate response for a young man out of control. And the father said he was going to jump from a bridge so that he could join them in death. Now, I don't believe that for a minute, that he was actually going to do that. But isn't that crazy how when people do stuff and then they claim they were going to kill themselves, but then they somehow just don't. They managed to kill everybody but themselves. And then they're like, but I was going to kill myself. No, you weren't. No, you weren't. But her father says to her, to Anaya, you're not a killer. Go home. And then Anaya chases him with this sock in the rock, sock that has the rocks in it or whatever. And the father says he wasn't trying to kill them, just the mother. And he says that the mother screamed and that she held the girls and that's why they're burned. So each of the parents is blaming the other one as to how the girls got burned. But obviously you took the girls in there. And if they wind up burned as a result of you trying to set the mother on fire, it's still your fault, but whatever. So he said, he's telling them, your mother lied to you or whatever. So he understands, though, that Anaya is pregnant. And he's like, look, when the dust settles after all of this, my sons are dead and you done killed my wife and all of this. Basically, when the dust settles, you just bring the baby back and we just won't ever talk about this anymore. We won't talk about all the blood on the ground. And he takes her hand and she takes his. And she gives him the sock with the rock. And I'm like, so she still doesn't learn how not to get tricked. She got tricked by Riley. And now, trying to save his life when he was intent on killing her. And the same thing with the father. So he has tears. He did have tears in his eyes during all of this. And he asked, how far along are you? And she says she's 11 weeks. And then he slaps her. And then, of course, he starts, basically going to physically assault her, so going to beat her. And so he says that the older one, talking about his sons, the smart one, he was going to be somebody. And if you weren't pregnant, I'd cut your eyes out and make you eat them. You go back to that heathen corpse and you tell her, I'd do it all over again if I could. So he's talking about the mama, like you go back to your mama. So he's not going to kill her. Go back to your mama and tell her that I would still do it again. And then he smokes a cigarette. So he drags the bodies of his son into the hallways and he continues to drink and whatever. And Anaya confronts him and says, somebody got to go today and the world can't hold us both. Right. And so Racine jumps in and then they both fight their father and they're both beating him. And then they have this final confrontation in the hallway. And Anaya pushes him into the bathroom and, douses him with alcohol and lights a match and watches while he burns and screams. And then at the last minute, Anaya threw her sister into the burning tub. And she watches, the house and burns, as it burns. Did she throw her sister into the tub? What was the issue?
He put her.
Huh?
You thought she pushed her, but he put her in.
He pulled her in. Okay. So, and then at the last minute, this is it could be interpreted differently because we watched it a couple times toward the end. So at the last minute, it seems I thought that Anaya pushed her sister into the tub to burn her up. But then I don't know. I'm conflicted on this. Y'all tell me what you think, because also I think Heit, you were saying that it looked like he pulled Anaya. I mean, he pulled Racine into the tub and she was getting burned up, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. But the way she responds outside, she goes out of the house and then she watches as the house and they burning down, and she's screaming. She watches until sunrise. So she's watching for a long time. And the reason that there's no, fire department or nothing coming is because this house is in a very remote place. It's out in the boonies. And so she drops that bloody sock in a rock and then she walks away. And then we hear her say, Anaya, all by herself for the first time. And then she gets on a Greyhound. And then at the end, we see Anaya holding her baby. And that's that. So that's how the movie ends. And I don't know, like, what did you think? Was it a good movie to you?
It was okay, I guess.
Why was it just okay? I thought it was. I like movies that make me think about these kinds of things.
Well, I'm not into the depictions of violence anymore, like I used to be. Like,
yeah,
it's just why? Just because you may think that someone needs revenge or there needs to be vengeance doesn't mean that I got to see every little piece of it. Sort of like, some people, they don't want to see the meat getting processed, but they want to eat the meat, right? You want to have the result.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. The depictions of violence in the film are very over the top. It kind of almost reminds you of the kind of Quentin Tarantino, like, I got to see everything. I did appreciate that they didn't show the mother's burned body, but I felt like we didn't have to see all the graphic depictions of violence to have walked away with much of the same feeling about the movie. At least I didn't, because the concepts the things that made me like this film, I would have liked it anyway. I really liked the film a lot. In fact, I want to at some point go back and watch it again and see what else I think. Again, this is just a very fresh analysis. This isn't like having had time to fully research things, and this is just kind of a out of the theater, if you will, first impression of the film. So I'm definitely open to hearing what you guys have to think, what you guys think in the comments about the film. So one of the big things is, what did you think about like the ending of the movie? Like, do you think that, it changes whether you feel she killed her sister or not?
I don't. So it just depends on whether you take in the "this person does not exist" trope, and amongst other of our fan theories, right?
Yeah.
So you have that, hey, she was the whole Greyhound part that was on Jason's lyric. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where you wake up on the bus and it's like, so one of you don't exist, and then at the end you're returning back to the same place of that bus stop.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? But I think it's more of that this is about, facing your fears or addressing old trauma and stuff, because even when she's in the presence of the father, then she can't be that Racine character until somehow it came out, like when you're pushed to the edge, started with Riley as well, right? So Racine is one part and Anaya is the other. So also, once the trauma is faced and is dealt with, then she can just exist as herself. And that's why Racine went into the fire as well, and then no longer exists from that point on, or is dead.
Yeah. And I think you could debate that. Of course, people are like, did she ever exist? There definitely is the part where it feels like surreal at certain parts where you go, okay, like, is this whole thing real? It's so
like,
over the top.
Out of nowhere, it's like, oh, now we're just wake up on a bus.
Is this a fever dream?
Yeah.
Like,
and then at the point where he's in the bathtub and then reaches out and grabs her, you just can't do it. It's like the spirit world has done it, because he's already pretty much dead and his arms stretch out like a demon. Really?
Yeah, the way you said it. Yeah, that's basically what it was like, So So yeah, there's just is a lot to be unpacked with this. But another thing is, all right, is God is a title, because I think that, you know, it's going to take a lot more time than we have in this moment to unpack all of the different concepts. But I did want to talk about that as a title and kind of what it means, what we think it means, and you know, did you have any idea of any thought on that?
Of what the title means?
Yeah,
I don't know. I
God
think it's explaining the movie in itself. It's an allegory, right? It's that about the patriarchy in religion itself, right? So you got man, which is the father, right? Who is Jesus, and you have divine and Ezekiel, who is waiting on their return. And Ezekiel is who? Son of man, right? So, and then you got these other little tidbits about how it must feel good since everybody else does it, which could be pointing to, you know, the sort of idea of throwing the first stone. And Racine, you know, after Ezekiel chased them, was talking about how ain't nobody innocent, which is about us all living
sinners
in sin, right? And then, you know, all of the, you know, twisting the God to be the woman, right? And then how the men in this, or man, is the patriarchy in a sense, and what his fruit too.
Yeah, and you know, I was kind of thinking like, is God is, you know, and the first part of it I kind of honed in on was like God is, and then, you know, I think about like
God is a man, right?
God is a man, you know, God is, and in the Bible, kind of the idea of, you know, all of the positive attributes that go along with who God is, right? And then, but is, the word is in front of that. And then the fact that in here we're talking, God is being referred to as their mother because she's the creator of their life and all of that. You know, so it's like asking the question at the same time to me, like, well, is God, and then God is, like, it's almost pointing to asking and answering a question. And what is that question? And for me, it was just evoked in what I already came to the table understanding, because, you know, because it pulls this familiarity with the Bible and all of these things that we've heard before. Yeah. You know, God is love. God is, you know, right. All of these different
and also
things.
With the whole David Oyelowo, it's
David Oyelowo, yeah.
Yeah, it's that, hey, we need to speak this certain way. God is, right? And God is would say that God exists, right? In a weird, you know, if you put some subservience on it, right? But is God is would mean something like, does God exist? Who?
Yeah, it's definitely a very introspective sort of question that each individual has to ask and answer, you know, for themselves. But I like the way you broke it down in talking about like tying together the names that we hear, because it is all definitely very biblical. And right. I wasn't familiar with the play that you know, she wrote, so I didn't know anything about this.
Yeah, I don't know how what is different from the play until now too. But also you have the thing like Racine in French is root, right? The root, and then Anaya could be grace, like we talked about, you know, a year ago or something like that, right? What was it? 2 years
in Sinners.
Yeah. In Sinners, and something else
name
around
Grace.
that time. Oh, it was two Graces.
Yeah.
We'll
link that video where we
Racine
talk about the name.
Is the root of, it could be the root of evil, right? How people like to say it, but also the baseline default person that's embodied in the twins.
Well, and what about the idea that, you know, Anaya is becoming a mother, or is a mother really already, because she's pregnant in this film, and so she is now God. Right. Yeah. And she's the one who survives in the end. So God survives in the end. And it's interesting to me that she never goes back to the mother, or we don't see that happen. I just assume the mother just dies.
Yeah,
you know,
because she knew that wasn't her mama really in the same way. Right. It was just kind of, she didn't want to do any of this. She's like, we don't even know that lady. You know,
so to get back to the mother and the father, What did you think about them? Like, I think that they were both wild, crazy and manipulative. And I don't know that we could really believe much of what the mother said, except that it seemed to be somewhat believable because of what Chuck says, as far as that and we see the father act just totally nuts. But
yeah, but that doesn't mean that she did not grab them. Right? That could be like a woman's instinct too, a mother's instinct
to grab her children.
Yeah. One last hug, or you know what I'm saying, or anything, right? To try to protect them or whatever, right? And being under the torment of being burned. Who knows what you do?
Yeah. So I don't know. It just was this movie made me think of a lot of things, and I love films that make me question, think about stuff, these scenarios, especially because, you know, the default setting is, hey, family doesn't do this to other family. And, you know, and then we see the family literally destroying itself. He has destroyed all of his children.
But the plot on its own doesn't hold up that much, right? You got two girls, two women, right? They were burned, whatever, meet their mother who abandoned them along with the father, right? And then the mother like, hey, I know y'all don't know me or nothing, but go make your daddy dead, right? So then they go and they find his first wife, and then he's not there. They go and then find the second wife, and then come across some other twins, and then kill him, and then one of the twins die. Right? So by itself, it's just not good. Unless you try to add all this other stuff on top of it.
Well, and I think it's all the other stuff that makes it good, right? Isn't it the details that make it it a good story?
It can't be, hey, I'm gonna tell a story. This guy walked to the store, and then it's all this symbolism that made it good. The story of him walking to the store has to be good as well.
Yeah, but I think what makes good stories is that it can be something that is as mundane as walking to the store, you know, to use your example. Yeah. But it's the fixings and the details.
Like Friday. Friday is the story of them sitting on a porch, but then they get into this trouble along the way, right?
But how is that different than here? It's the story of them going to get vengeance on their father, which I would say on its face is a better story than just sitting on the porch, you know, but yet it's the fixins of the story, the details that make it
the
even
details
better.
Of the intricacies of what happens in the story. So then, you know, this guy, he doesn't smoke weed, and then he ends up smoking weed, and because of that, his friend ropes him in with this other guy who he's selling weed, but because they smoke weed, so he smoked weed so much, then that's how he end up having to you know, have to get this money, and then the other things with Debo and all of that, right?
Yeah, I mean,
and
I
like
guess I see
this
it.
One is, I want to go kill man, and then you go and kill man. I knew it before I even watched the movie.
So you felt it did what you thought it would do, and that there just wasn't enough excitement or whatever.
No, it's not about excitement. I just think the story wasn't good.
Yeah, I guess this is where we went, you know, we'll disagree on this story being good or not. I liked it. I very much enjoyed it. And I know you didn't really like the movie all that much. I thought it was a good movie, and I liked where it took me in terms of my contemplation about the film. I want to know how much of this is, you know, because obviously this is open to interpretation. So how much of it you guys think is real? Like, is this just, again, like a fever dream? Is it did we at some point in the movie veer off from reality? You know, by the way, you had pointed out earlier, like with the whole Greyhound reference and stuff, you know, and us talking about Jason's lyric. We do have a fan theory about Jason's lyric. I'll link that in the description. But, you know, that's kind of what we were talking about, or the idea that maybe a character doesn't exist, which is another one of probably our biggest, most viral fan theory about Menace to Society and O-Dog.
Isn't alive, right?
You know, yeah.
Yeah.
So
because the thing was, they were drinking water, and, you know, they were burned. There's so much fire in this thing, and water is too good to be true. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, but you know, so there's a lot that can definitely be analyzed with this film, and let us know too if you guys had seen the play or were even familiar with the play prior to this, because you know,
I wasn't aware of it.
But what if Racine was the other twin, and then since you're linked already in your souls, she died physically, but she was always with Anaya?
Okay, wait. What if Racine was the other twin? So you're saying, what if Racine?
There were really two twins, and Racine died with the mother.
Oh, in the beginning,
right?
See, to me, yeah.
And that brings together the bus part of her being solo on the bus in the end. But there was no water to put that fire out to save Racine.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Did Racine actually ever exist in this film, beyond the point of the fire? Because up to this point, Racine is always the one who saves Anaya.
Yeah. But Racine got the letter, I guess.
Yeah. Racine is the one who's the stronger one, right? And it depicted that way early in the film. She's the one who takes care of business. She's the one who fixes the things that Anaya can't bring herself to do.
Maybe that's about our ancestral religion or our ancestral spirituality.
It could be.
Our, quote, ancestors, right? Who is guiding and helping you. And then when the mother prays, quote, prays, reaches out to the ancestors or her children. That ain't necessarily ancestors. Somebody know the spiritual world a lot more than I know. But yeah, then that could be the way that the message will, talking to her passed on child, her deceased child, and that message is automatically passed on to the twin. So many different ways to.
And, just the idea of twins and people viewing twins as like really kind of two halves of the same whole. And then I think from a psychological perspective, there would be a whole lot of reasons, much like the reasons that we gave for the dog doesn't exist theory, why a person would want to separate themselves from all of the bad acts, right? It's not me. It's Racine. Racine is the one who does the bad things. I don't do the bad things. And much like in Menace to Society, we saw dog doing the most heinous of things. But in our theory, it was like, hey, Kane is the one actually doing all of this stuff. He just views it because of his, and then we kind of couched it in a mental illness. But he just uses that as that character, that other person as the scapegoat.
Right. But in the whole symbolism of everything, speaking in metaphor, even with the fan theory is that you can't take everything literally, which is why a lot of people fall short of grasping or understanding the concept.
Yes, you can't take everything literally. And it's odd because, we do this at different times, because another one, and by the time you see this, there's also, and it'll be linked in the description, we're going to investigate and discuss this idea of whether play from the House Party movie in 1990 is the father of Jody and Baby Boy, because that's something that people kept saying when we covered House Party, and us talking about whether that's even a reality or not, and the reasons why people want to believe things. We got to be able to understand the film in its totality, and everything has to make sense. And if you have something that in your theory just debunks it and doesn't make sense, then you have to have a reasonable way to explain that. And many people have tried, like with the fan theory on Menace to Society, to debunk it. They come out and say, oh, well, they were talking to other people. They were doing whatever, Yeah, but we explained that, and if you have a reasonable explanation as to why the objections or the attempts at debunking it are invalid, then it can make sense. But if you don't, then... my point is that it all has to make sense. It all has to be tied up into a neat little box that doesn't allow for somebody to just come along and debunk it. And trust and believe that we've had many people who will be like, oh, I'm debunking this right off the bat, and it's just like, okay, bruh, I know you think you're cooking, but you haven't actually listened to what we said and the explanation. And here in this film, I think the biggest thing is just the absurdity of some of the stuff that we see.
And they were only separate at one part, right? During the lap dance part. They were separated.
And they're speaking telepathically in the film. So there's just a whole lot going on. But I did like the movie. And I want to know whether or not y'all liked it too. And if we should discuss more about this movie. But that's a real question. You know, at what point did Racine die? Because she dies in the movie, but at what point did she die?
If you made it this far, type "she should have left" in the comments.